paper presenter to come up and present, Dr. Ms. Marufa Akhtar. She'll be presenting on securing the Bay of Bengal regional security perspective in the era of climate change. Marufa.
I'm sorry, sir. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Salimul Haq, for giving me the floor. I'm Subaita Fairuz. Marufa Akhtar couldn't be here today.
Apologies.
She suddenly became ill. So.
Oh dear, I'm very sorry to hear that. Subaita, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so before I begin, I just want to say this paper is a work in progress, and this is the first draft. So I want to first talk about why talking about regional security in the era of climate change is significant. It's because there have been several warnings from climate change experts and environmental science scholars who have said that environmental security in the Bay of Bengal region has rarely been on the agenda of the states. And even when they have been, they have not, been combined with ecological security. And so we want to basically talk about how we are combining that environmental security, ecological security with human security in this paper. So the main objective of the study is to redefine what regional security should mean for the states in the Bay of Bengal region in this era of climate change. The focus previously when we talk about security studies has been on military security, and the discourses have predominantly been very state-centric. Even though human security has been taken into account, the threat to human lives and livelihoods and the environment due to climate change has not been viewed through a regional security lens. Now, for the purposes of this study, the regional security concept as redefined by Sanjay Chaturvedi and Vijay Sakuja has been used. Now, the study is predominantly qualitative in nature, and information has been collected at the moment from secondary data sources, but primary research also might be carried out in the future. Okay, so for the Bay of Bengal region, obviously has a very rich history because of its strategic location, and that has ensured that it remains a key player in global geopolitics. Now, the Bay sustains 37% of Asia's population. It has a growing GDP, and many countries like India, China, and even Bangladesh have trade routes in this region. However, given that the issue of climate change is compounded through developmental and economic activities, when studying this region, the transboundary nature of climate change should be taken into account. When mapping the Bay has generally been concerned with physical and material resources and geographies, what is also of paramount interest today is to explore the details of human ecological cultural geographies so as to determine what kind of challenges people in this region might face due to climate change. So we need to study environmental impacts on human lives and livelihoods more in depth instead of dealing with environmental issues separately and human lives and livelihood issues separately. So first, I will define the concept of regional security and how in this paper we have redefined this concept. Now, previously, the focus of regional security complex has been to deal with the state and its political and military resources or sectors. And the important thing is that this theory brings to the forefront the importance of the regional level in international security studies. Now, whether or not to locate environmental issues within the broader national security paradigm is a very debated topic. The stronger argument is in support of locating environmental security in the wider framework of human security because state-centric approaches are inadequate, and as such, equity and impacts are not stopped by state lines. Therefore, in redefining this regional security concept, 1 or 2 states in the region will not be able to bring about the required changes. Their military, despite its organization, will not be able to bring about climate change mitigations. And human security issues now need to become central concerns in the regional security aspect. The Bay of Bengal region, when we talk about it, and when we talk about regional security here, we are not just talking about South Asia or Southeast Asia or East Asia. There are many different states from all of these different regions of the world who have vested interests in the Bay of Bengal. The ecosystem and the natural resources of the Bay transcends these state boundaries and call for regional and sub-regional cooperation and a shift in the outdated view of geography and politics. Now, the other thing that has most often slipped under the radar is the considerations of equity, differential vulnerability, and the different adaptive capacity of the various communities surrounding the Bay of Bengal region, including obviously the coastline regions. Not all communities are equally vulnerable, and not all of them have similar levels of adaptability in the face of climate change. So we need to focus in these differential vulnerabilities and differential adaptabilities if we are going to move forward and protect them instead of coming up with general solutions and general policy recommendations. So now I will move on to the next section and talk more in depth about the kind of climate change evidences we are seeing in the Bay of Bengal region and the effects. So these were some of the images. Obviously, cyclones are increasing, as previous presenters have talked about, and the intensity, the frequency, and these threaten to displace people, and these cause fatalities. Next, the intensity of floods in the Ganga and Brahmaputra basin, which already sustains some of the world's poorest people, is also expected to increase, and it is projected that almost 125 million people will become homeless, out of which 75 million of them will be from Bangladesh. At the same time, deforestation have caused a warming of the environment, especially when fossil fuels are used for electricity generation, and also leads to the emission of greenhouse gases. It is noted how the world's oceans also act as heat sinks, and this leads to the rise of global ocean temperatures. And these oceans are also acting as carbon dioxide sinks, and 1/3 of the carbon dioxide is absorbed by them. This raises the acidity levels of the oceans, and all these minute changes, whether it be temperature or the acidity, is going to affect the marine ecosystem in the long term. Now, while more natural resources are being discovered in the Bay of Bengal, concerns are arising regarding how these will be extracted and what kind of adverse effects it may have on the people living in the coastline regions. Whether these will have long-term or short-term benefits also needs to be explored, and otherwise, short-term benefits might result in long-term problems for this region. Already, the lives and livelihoods of the people are threatened due to scarcity of resources, water scarcity being one of them. And then there is a scarcity of fish in fisheries now. Now, fisheries sustain some of the people living in poverty or below the poverty line, and so their main sources of income are getting depleted. What happens then? So, meanwhile, there are also, so these are just the list, and regarding other regional security issues, there is an increase of trafficking, smuggling, movement of illegal drugs. So these are all increasing because climate change is a threat multiplier. And there is already scarcity of resources, intensity of cyclones, intensity of flooding is increasing, and all of these will ultimately lead to migration of people, large amounts of them. And when migration occurs, the risk of violence also increases. Now, the Syrian war is often cited as an example that the civil conflict there was exacerbated by these kind of climate change-induced pressures. And social and cultural conflicts or frictions increasing in a region like the Bay of Bengal, where there are so many ethnicities, cultures, and religious groups, can lead to devastating effects on the region's security and to the security of many of these states if climate change is not mitigated on a regional level. So this has led to some policy recommendations, the first of which is that we need to improve governance in the region. And obviously there are some talks about hegemonic power being important to maintain this governance, but well, that remains to be seen. And then we talk about the developing strategies for sustainable use and management of the natural resources, doing more studies and not just extracting new resources whenever we find them. Then we have educating the vulnerable communities on climate change and its effect. This is perhaps the most important because deforestation activities are conducted most often by these communities, and they are unaware of the long-term problems associated with these things. And then there is improving cooperation between states to develop renewable energy resources. So we talk about cross-border energy trade between the South Asian countries of Bhutan, Nepal, India, and Bangladesh. So we are alleviating the pressure on fossil fuels and all of that. Then obviously develop and promote nature-based solutions to protect communities and wildlife. The Sundarbans often make a natural barrier to the tropical storms. It is important for reforestation, to stop landslides, to act as natural barriers to tropical cyclones and such, and floods. So all of those things are important. And also, lastly, to recognize climate change as a human security issue and putting it in the regional security paradigm. And that is where I will end the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Subaita, for that excellent presentation. That brings us to the end of our 3 designated papers. We will now move on to the discussion section where we have 4 discussants.